absolutely trucked from behind. She's ready to do the hit. The whistles are being blown. She takes a...
All right, well, here it is. Backup quarterback. Chandler Harnish throws, and Pam Oliver, wham. Let me tell you, that ball had a tight spiral, and it had some hump baby on it. And, hey, Pam, toughest person in this stadium.
Thanks for you guys hitting me in the face with the
Oh, yeah, we apologize on that.
This kid is physical. He's strong. I mean, arguably the top offensive lineman this morning in the one-on-ones. I mean, he's out there with a kid like Cameron Robinson. And what?
You know, all of a sudden there really have been questions about this defense, which is ranked 21st. Not having Benson is going to hurt. You know, I had an interesting talk with offensive coordinator Tom Clutt. Did you guys see that football? I saw it. Anyway.
And I know we're moving fast, you know, get physical out there on the field. And we come at full speed and she's sitting down, you know, taking pictures. I know that kind of hurt her. So I had to make sure she was all right.
What did you say?
No, I just rubbed her head 'cause it looked like I hit her head. Yeah.
Is my camera glitching around for y'all, or is it just on mine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It looks pretty cool.
Fuck. Hang on.
It almost looked like you were dancing to the music.
I have no idea what the fuck's going on. Like, we were just talking before we started the show, and none of that was happening. And now, here I am. Let's see. Oh, that's even better.
It reminds me of it reminds me of being an early youth at around 10 p.m. after the parents went to bed, looking at channels way high on the dial. Just saying.
Jim used to sit around watching those illegal channels.
Oh, who didn't? Yeah, and then one kid in my neighborhood whose granddad owned an arcade and was just like a electronics wizard or whatever, gave their family like 5 of those pirate boxes where every channel was open, and that is dangerous to do to a bunch of adolescent males coming of age. Why are you guys in the basement all the time?
Justin says he has to reboot his computer. So we'll,
oh boy.
We'll fill in some time here. I see that you're mourning the loss of Todd Monken.
Yeah. You know, I'm bitter. I'm bitter about it because it wasn't a mutual breakup. You know, I didn't want to see him leave. I thought we had a good thing, you know, but I can understand the desire to go back to the NFL. He was always an NFL guy. It was kind of odd that we were able to land him from, I think it was the Browns was his last NFL OC spot. And so to find out that we were getting an NFL offensive coordinator is like, wow, this guy must have really sucked ass in the NFL to come down to college. I mean, can't even be like a tight ends coach in the NFL. So when he was experiencing great success and bringing us multiple trophies, it was like, oh, cool. He's up there in age. So what real aspirations can he fulfill if he were to go back to the NFL? Anytime he was asked about it, he said, I want to be wherever we're winning, and we're winning here. My wife loves it in Athens. We have it was the full blown, I'm just going to lie to you and say I'm not going anywhere. And the first chance I get, I'm gone. And so if it was like a year or two of like a severe downturn in performance, I'd be like, thank God. See you later. Wish you the best. I would be much more supportive and well wishes because it's happened before. I mean, teams get bad coordinators where you actually enjoy seeing them go. I hated seeing him go because offense is the side of the football where we need extreme competency because, at least for Georgia, Kirby Smart's a defensive coach and one of the best ones in the game. I'm never, when Dan Lanning left to go be Oregon's head coach, didn't bother me for even a second. But the offensive coordinator, he's got to really nail that position, and we're going to be on our fourth one under Kirby. And so far, 2 out of the 3 have been huge busts. He's only gotten one right. And I guess the good thing is that the OC that's taking his place is very, very familiar to Georgia fans. And Mike Bobo, he played at Georgia. He's coached at Georgia. I am very familiar with who he is. But I mean, he was the offensive coordinator, I think, from like 06 to 2014. That's a long ass time. Like this feels like we've kind of been here before, and we weren't winning any natties back then. So it's kind of hard to be like, this is going to be an improvement. It's going to be more of a return to the past. I know that that's probably not the case, but it feels that way. And there was a long, long, long time where his offensive play calling was, to say it was vanilla would be doing a disservice to all things vanilla. It was bubble screens and runs up the middle. It was super boring. So I hope he's changed. I hope he can be more of the guy he was his last couple of years at Georgia, where we were setting program records for points per game. In fact, his last season, we were averaging more points per game than we have been since Kirby's been a coach. And that includes the 65-7 natty, this past year. I think we averaged like 43.3 points this year, and his last year, I think it was like 43.5 points per game. So
wow.
Who knows? It could be a total, just as long as we don't lose any players over it and we can retain all of our current commitments, I think we'll be fine because it's the Jimmies and Joes. If you have the better players on the field, which Georgia will in the majority of the games they play, we should be fine. But there was just something about Monken that immediately made Georgia an offensive threat, which we have not been my entire life. As far as like you got to worry about receivers, tight ends, and running backs. But that was my very long and drawn out response. But yeah, fuck the Ravens. I hope that they lose Lamar. I hope they don't get above 6 wins. I hope it's just 10 years of despair. And because this is sports and I'm fully eligible to be petty. This is the beauty of it. Unreasonable pettiness. That's what I bring to this show.
Jim doesn't do salty at all. Not even a little bit. He always rational, always always logical and sound mind when making his decision on who to hate and not.
Yeah, very methodical. Very little emotion involved.
I wonder if this is a move that they're making as part of an effort to try to keep Lamar to stick around.
I think so.
Because Greg Roman's always been his calling card is the running game, and he's had running quarterbacks, and he wants to utilize running quarterbacks. And I suspect that Lamar, especially if they're just going to franchise tag him, which I have my doubts that he would even sign the tender. I feel like if it's gotten to this point, he'd be more likely to just hold out. But if he's going to sign the tag to stay there for another year, then bringing in someone like Monken might be their way of saying, all right, we're not going to beat the crap out of your body. Like, we're not going to give you the financial commitment that you want, but we're also not going to completely abuse you like we have been.
Mm-hmm.
So going to take a more competent offensive coordinator, and we're going to build around you and treat you like more of a pocket plus kind of quarterback as opposed to a purely running quarterback, which I think Lamar is capable of being that.
Yeah.
Well, even in college, he wasn't a purely running quarterback. Like they utilized his ability to throw the ball, and his running ability is what kind of made him a special type of player. Like, which I mean, that's a Petrino offense anyway. But they should have been doing something like that all along. They shouldn't have just been like, we're going to let Lamar run the ball, and then if there's nowhere to run it, just throw it to a tight end or running back. Like dump. It can't be Lamar runs the ball or dumps it off. Like there has to be a legitimate passing game.
I think that the Ravens, in their current makeup, all they need to do is retain Lamar, first pick, whatever that is. I don't know if it's what round it would be. Whatever their first pick is, get a receiver. There will be one because you already have the tight ends and likely in Andrews. I think I'm getting all these names right. The running game isn't bad. It's just injuries. If you have a healthy backfield of your current status, you're going to be fine. And if you look at how Monken utilized Georgia's offense, superior tight end play, a laundry list of running backs, and receivers that nobody knew, he got the most out of. I mean, white guys with the last name McConkey was our leader in catches and yards. So I think that if they can, like I said, if they can retain Lamar, get a wide receiver in there, and just hold on to the running back room, they will very quickly turn it around. Which they didn't have a bad year this year. I just think they will be able to dominate in some games where this year it was like a struggle session. 13-3 kind of a win will be 31-10 or something like that. That's what
Rashad Bateman is not a bad receiver. Like when he was healthy and they were actually like taking some opportunities to throw the ball to him, he was a very serviceable, maybe not a true number one, but for that offense, he's a good enough number one. Like they didn't have terrible receivers. They just didn't utilize them for shit.
But if you go out in the draft and get a guy like Olave or who was the guy, New York Jets, rookie of the year receiver? Wilson. Yeah, go get one of those guys, top 5 receiver in this year's draft. That offense will be fine. And the Ravens haven't ever really had a bad defense. And I don't think that they had one this past year. I think it was just their offense could not score points.
Especially once they added what's his name?
Roquan Smith.
Roquan Smith. Once they added Roquan Smith, they were I think they were easily the best run defense and maybe like a top 5 pass defense.
Yeah.
And so really, their offense, you could tell going into the season that their whole offensive identity, this is really very much a Greg Roman type of thing. Their whole offensive identity was going to be they were going to use the threat of Rashad Bateman as a deep threat to unlock the rest of the offense. And so they just basically didn't have a plan B. As soon as Rashad Bateman went down with an injury, all of a sudden their offense became much more predictable and easy to defend. And it didn't help that Mark Andrews was hurt half the year too. So I think their picks this season, they've got 23, 87, 125, 160, and 200. So that's a first, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. So they've got that 23rd pick here is right in the range to draft a good wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that has to be the route that they go. They can't have an offense that you lose one player and the whole offense falls apart. You lose one wide receiver and all of a sudden your offense becomes one-dimensional. Because apart from him, you've got Demarcus Robinson, who was like their leading receiver. He was like the 5th wide receiver in Kansas City and got cut even after they traded Tyreek Hill. Then you've got the corpse of Sammy Watkins. You've got Devin Duvernay, who's interesting, but he's a little bit of a gadgety kind of receiver. And then there's like Tylan Wallace and James Prochet, and those are nice 4th and 5th options, but they need another legit wide receiver to pair with their tight ends and Rashad Bateman. And I think what I always think of Todd Monken with is the 2018 Buccaneers when you had Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was like, I remember if he was exactly setting passing records, but it was one of the best seasons, one of the best he's ever looked. Mm-hmm. And that Buccaneers offense was lighting people up. And that was really what got Monken on my radar. So I was, being an NFL guy, I was bummed to see him leave the NFL world. So I'm excited to see him back now. I'm kind of indifferent to the Ravens. I want to see Lamar go somewhere else because the Ravens are just so uninteresting to me that I don't want one of the most interesting players in the league to be trapped with one of the least interesting teams.
I and we've talked a lot about Lamar, where he could potentially end up Atlanta being a possible landing spot. I think he stays. I honestly think that they are able to retain him at least for one more year. Give this whole new offense a look now that Monken's here. Look at what he did. You know, he had a walk-on quarterback go get 2 natties and be a Heisman finalist. And you want to have him engineer plays for Lamar. I think that's enough to at least entice him for a year. I don't think that the franchise tag will be able to cut it. I think that they'll have to get creative financially, but I mean, any NFL team should be able to put their brain trust together and figure out how to retain their best talent. And, you know, it would be like the Dolphins losing Dan Marino in like 1992. Like it wouldn't happen. You do whatever it takes to hold on to him. Now watch me get fact check and be like, actually, Marino. To my recollection, he was a Dolphin his entire career. 92, probably he was still playing. I don't think he retired till like the late
Ravens
90s.
have $25 million in cap space, so that's before the. I think that's probably before the. Oh no, that's with the cap having gone up, and there's all kinds of things they can do. $25 million, they can make just about anything happen.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of dead money. They
say they're usually a pretty financially sharp team. Like the way the front office runs that, they don't typically have a whole lot of like bad contracts, dead money type situations. Like they're usually pretty on it. So
yeah, and so like for this week, it's F the Ravens, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be rooting for him. Like I want him, I want to see the same offense that left, Athens with 2 trophies, go to Baltimore and be able to cut it up. Like I don't have an AFC team because I've always been NFC. And so that means that every year I kind of get to look at the AFC and pick which team I think might be the most interesting. Like I'm not going to be a Chiefs fan. That's bandwagon shit. But like this year I was like, kind of semi rooting for the Colts. I was hoping, and it had nothing to do with Matt Ryan. It had everything to do with the way they were constructing that team and what it looked like it could be. Going into the season, the parts were there. They just haven't really fully gelled yet. And I was really hoping that would happen. I enjoy watching that, like teams that have been building towards something and then it coming together and actually showing you something on the field. Like I get more out of that than watching 14-2 or I guess 15-2 team just dominate every week. Unless it's my team, then
I thought that about the Colts too, and with that being the local team, I thought it would be exciting. And then I watched Matt Ryan bounce so many swing passes.
Drink.
Man, we hit the quota.
I had to squeeze it in there. You gave me the setup. You mentioned the Colts. Like if nobody said anything about the Colts all night, I'd have been trying to find some way to like awkwardly throw it in. But
So the Super Bowl just happened, and we had the 2 number 1 seeded teams playing in the Super Bowl. So that was kind of like I don't think going into this, I don't think anybody would have been surprised at that potential outcome. But there were more teams that were letdowns this year than there were that were surprises, as far as like, I'm surprised this team is good. I think some of the lower tier playoff teams only got in because the teams that were expected to be there just fell flat on their face. Am I wrong in that? And if I'm not wrong, who do you think is the most disappointing team from this past year?
I was going to say the Giants were the most surprising. I didn't expect anything from them at all. And they, like, even for as kind of like dumb, lucky, fluky as some of their early season wins seemed to be, when it came down to like you have to keep winning some games to make the playoffs, like they did what they had to do. So the Giants were the most surprising to me in that regard.
I think the Broncos and the Rams were probably the 2 biggest letdown teams, although I expected the Rams to be bad. I picked them to be 4th in the division, the early season picks. there was too many question marks about their roster, and it was kind of like a house of cards, and I just felt like it was too many what ifs. So I expected the Rams to underwhelm, but if you look at like the preseason Super Bowl picks last offseason, I think the Rams were like the 4th or 5th best odds, and they wound up being what, 5-12? Yeah, 5-12
with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. And then the Titans were probably another team that they wound up 7-10. But I mean, everyone kind of always, the Titans are a weird team because everybody always underrates them. So then people will, as a consequence, start overrating them. And I mean, having Ryan Tannehill's like the definition of quarterback purgatory, because he's just good enough to keep you competitive, but he's never quite good enough to really get you over the hump.
So he's like that consummate 8-8 guy.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a Jeff Fisher of quarterbacks. So yeah, and I think the Raiders were probably a pretty big disappointment to a lot of people too. I think a lot of people expected the Josh McDaniels thing to come in and just hit the ground running. Everyone was kind of like, oh, he's learned from his past mistakes, and they've got so much talent on the team, and they look like they're really poised to be competitive. And then the team just face planted. And honestly, I remember at one point where they finished the season 6-11. I remember at one point, I think they were something like 4-8, and they'd lost those 8 games by a combined score of like 12 points. And they were all, and even if you broke it down on a more granular level than that, there was several of the games were really more attributable to bad luck than necessarily, just the ball bounced the wrong way for them a number of games, and just randomness kind of did them in. So at that point, it was like they were 4-8, but they could have just as easily, you tweak a couple of things and they could have just as easily been like 10-2.
Well, and like people talk about momentum not being a thing, but if you look at trends and stuff like that, like you have analytic, and it's usually the real analytics types that say that momentum isn't a thing. But if you look at the actual like analytics of it, when something like that happens, it continues to happen. Like it's analytically proven that when you start to have a little bit of bad luck or momentum shifts against you, then it continues to shift against you. And like, it's one of those, like, you never can catch a break type of things. And then, that kind of felt like the Raiders season there for a while. It was just like, I mean, what we've got, Jim's favorite play of the season was Kyler Murray running around like a toddler. Like, we got shit like that. Like you're just kind of fucked.
Yeah. Like I would say, I'll echo your Giants as far as like the biggest surprise. I didn't see that coming. And what the Giants did is a good reminder on why I'm glad that I don't gamble or bet on sports, because I would lose my ass. Just clearly not good at it. But I gotta throw the Jaguars in there for a surprisingly good team. Now, you could look at the parts and pieces and talent that they had and say they should be pretty formidable, but you hadn't seen it. And just getting over the Urban Meyer debacle, first year as far as being a Jacksonville head coach, Christian Kirk coming over, like there was nothing to let you know what you were going to get. They could be good, but until you see it, it's just on paper. And so I'll say, expectations for that team should be, as high as possible going forward. If I was a Jaguars fan, I would be saying deep playoff run, if not Super Bowl next year, or it's a failure. And Jacksonville's not, those kind of expectations don't live in Duval, typically. So I would say that was a pretty big upward swing, and probably the most meh, like just kind of like, I guess, team of this past season were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
You still got Brady. He's won you a Super Bowl not too long ago, because he hasn't been in Tampa Bay that long. But you brought in Julio Jones, even though I knew that he's been washed up for 5 years.
If that division was like moderately healthy and like moderately competent this year, there's no way the Buccaneers win that division. Not with
that was going to be my final punch, and the reason why it's so meh. Like, yeah, you won the division, you went to a playoff game, but they should have steamrolled their way into the playoffs.
The Carolina Panthers, with literally an entire backup offense, almost won the division. Like,
yeah. There's a 4-way tie there.
Coach. Like, they fired their coach and they had a whole backup offense and they still almost won the division. Like, when that's
they beat the Buccaneers.
When that team beat the like that's a hell of an accomplishment.
Yeah. So given how bad the division was, and you have Hall of Famers all just strewn all over the field, you would think that they would have had a similar record to what Philly had this year. They should have been so much better. I'm glad they weren't, but to me, they get the most award of the year, and I'm more than happy to dole that out to any Tom Brady team.
I'll give you two other teams that I think were surprising, one from each conference. For the NFC, it'd be the Vikings. I don't think that they were really that great of a team, but I mean, they wound up with their 13-4. They had the second best record in football. They were really just kind of like the inverse of the Raiders. They took all of the bad luck that the Raiders they took all of the good luck that the Raiders didn't have. So really both of those teams, I think the Raiders and the Vikings were both the Vikings were 13-4, the Raiders were 6-11. I think both of those teams were 9-8 teams that they went to the opposite poles. The other team that I think was kind of surprising to me was the Dolphins. I think they were a lot more competitive than I expected. I definitely didn't expect them to make the playoffs from the get-go. And they wound up they were pretty formidable there for a little while in the middle of the season. And I think if Tua didn't have a brain made of jelly, then they probably would have been even better.
Oh yeah.
That's a real credit to Mike McDaniel.
I think a lot of that is if you spend any time with Dolphins fans going into the season, you would have expected the world. I mean, because my closest friend, next door neighbor, fellow podcast mate, whenever we decide to do podcasts, is a diehard Dolphins fan. Like, grew up during the 70s, watched, was there for the perfect season, all that stuff. So he's the only person I know who's a diehard Dolphins fan other than Tho. But I've known him longer and I hear it more from him. So he's my resident Dolphins expert, and he was just going on and on and on and on and on about this is our year. And I've heard him say that literally every year over the last 16 years. And they've been dog shit for the majority of those 16 years. But this year he was like, I really mean it this time. I know I say it every year, but when the Tyreek trade was made, he was like, that's it. That's all we needed. It's over with now. We're going. And so I was internally, and I have no problem admitting this, I was internally rooting against the Dolphins the entire year because I was tired of hearing about how good they're going to be. And I didn't celebrate when they were, when Tua's brain was getting scrambled. But I was kind of like, yeah, injuries. They're a real son of a bitch.
Shit happens. Sucks it was your team. The Vikings were one of those that I sat there and watched them all year, and I was like, there's no way they're this good of a team, but they just keep winning games. Like, what was the game they played in London? Like, I was just sitting at the kitchen table. Nobody else was really up. And so I had it on my phone, and I was just sitting there watching it. And I was like, watching this game, you would think the Vikings were getting beat by 20, and somehow they won the game. It was just like the most pathetic showing that I'd ever seen from a winning team. Like, they win in spite of themselves nonstop. They were
against Green Bay.
No,
they don't do those types of games.
No, they're not. They're not losing that kind of money. I can't remember who it was they played in London, but I was watching the game in the kitchen, and it's like, golly, how are they winning? Like, they just suck so bad, and they still won. And that was their season. Was they just sucked their way into victory somehow? Which, as a Packers fan, just just like knife right in my soul every fucking week.
We all know that feeling when our division superior for that year is just dominating. It's like,
I mean, we did have speaking of, our team or somebody's team, the Seahawks were surprisingly good. I don't think anybody really saw the Geno thing coming to fruition the way it did.
I know I didn't. I ridiculed you for drafting DK Metcalf. I'll never forget. I was like, who the fuck's throwing him the ball? Come on, dude. Geno's going to lead you to fucking success on the fantasy, football field. I was like, Justin will be out early. This should be fun.
I mean, I was out as early as you were, so.
I was I'm in a dynasty salary cap league, and I came into the season with Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Lamar Jackson as my quarterbacks. It's a super flex league, and I picked up what's his name, Geno, just kind of as nobody wanted him. I just signed him to like a 1-year, $2 million deal, and then I had for a second there I had 4 number 1 quarterbacks, and then Kyler turned into Kyler, and so I had 3 number 1 quarterbacks, and then Lamar died. And so I had 2 number 1 quarterbacks. I was hoping to like flip someone mid-season or something like that, and then it wound up I had to try to hold on to him, and it was a whole thing. But I expected Geno to be I expected Geno to be solid. I didn't expect him to have stretches where he was playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah.
And I said stretches. He definitely didn't for the whole season, but he had stretches where he had some of the most eye-popping throws I saw by anybody this season, not named Patrick Mahomes. It was genuinely impressive. Like, this guy knows what he's doing out there. He's very comfortable. He sees the field very well. And he did an interview after the season, and he said, now I've got actual game tape to learn from. So he said, I'm going to be even better. Because this whole time I'm just operating off of practice reps, and that's basically it. Now I've got actual game tape to go off of. So this was his 3rd year as a starter in his career. And it's interesting, the player who he was statistically the most similar to, I can remember if I said this on here before, the player he was statistically most similar to, and it was almost identical this season, was Joe Burrow, who was also playing in his 3rd year as a starter. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because Geno he's 32, I think, but he doesn't really have any mileage on him. So
right, he had some early runs in with the Jets, but like that was
the Rex Ryan Jets.
Yeah, he didn't really. I mean, even with those, he didn't get. I don't know. I don't think he got hit a lot. He just didn't have a lot to work with offensively, and so he got a bad rep for what he was playing under during that whole time. What's the so like in basketball, they project that you have a learning curve once you kind of hit maturity. You have a learning curve of about 100 games where you go from whatever you are to like the maximum potential of what you can be. And like, so that's like why kids who play AAU ball and play like year-round ball, they tend to develop a lot quicker than kids who just like play high school ball and don't do anything in the off season or play other sports and stuff, which is why you see a lot of the like the push for specialization, like where kids are only playing one sport and they play the sport year round, is because of the statistics that show that you need those reps and you need those games. Like, I wonder what it is for like an NFL quarterback, like as a starter, like what's the learning curve where you need to get like this many like live reps on a field before you kind of hit actually knowing what the fuck you're doing.
I'd say it's probably somewhere in the 40 to 50 games. That would be kind of my approximate guess. So 3 to 4 seasons. So there's some who get it quicker than others. Some of them who hit their ceiling quicker than others. But I think typically by the time you've seen a quarterback for, I'd say a minimum of 3 seasons, by then you've kind of really locked in who they are. And and then so like Joe Burrow, like he's got 3 seasons under his belt. Now I don't know if he has 3 seasons worth of games because
he was
had the
injured
year
his rookie year.
He was injured, yeah. So conceivably, you might say he still has some upside, but then you get a guy like Kyler. You know, he's getting pretty close to that 40 game mark, I think. And
I think he's there.
I think Kyler Murray is at John Fetterman levels. Like, this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, Kyler is better than Kyler. Yeah.
Has, go ahead. I'll see if I can come up how many. Oh, yeah, 57 games. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'd say it varies. Obviously, I think Burrow kind of, I think he came in and he was great. He just didn't have an O-line. Next year he's in the Super Bowl. I think he's already shown you what he's capable of. It's just a matter of how many times can you replicate that going forward throughout the rest of your career. Other players, it's like, Jordan Love, it's like, I don't know, it might be year 7 before we ever see him, or it might be next year. I don't know.
Well, like Andrew Luck, he had it year 1, year 2. Like, you knew he was going to be something special. You didn't have that big learning curve, but you have to. You can't go on the two ends of the opposite ends of the spectrum for what you're looking at in terms of like general progression. So yeah, I think that's why I was kind of wondering that out loud, because we know that there is a learning curve for sure. I just didn't know if there was any like analytics on where a rough approximation of where that kind of cutoff is.
I think the really, really, really good ones, like the elite ones, show you right out of the gate. Patrick Mahomes, I'd say even Jalen Hurts. He's progressed. He's gotten better. But I think it's within the 3 years. But I do agree that it's like a general 3-year generic rule in the NFL for coaches and players that after 3 years, if you haven't shown some level of promise towards progress, you're out. But if you have, now we start setting expectations. And I think the truly elite players kind of just come in and just show you, I'm capable of winning a Super Bowl. What team will you put around me to ensure that we get there? And that's why so many of the Super Bowl winning teams outside of the ones that are quarterbacked by Tom Brady have quarterbacks under rookie contracts, where you get that elite supreme talent you drafted correctly, but you had all the other parts that were much more expensive than the quarterback position for temporarily, and you immediately built up, go launch, and go win that thing. I think the real surprise is going to be, and I think we're kind of starting to go into this part of the NFL trajectory where rookie contracts now are closing out. Do you sell the farm to keep that quarterback, or do you let him go and just recycle another quarterback? Now we're kind of in this different tangent of NFL history of, in order to maintain longevity, what's the plan? Do you sacrifice the team for the quarterback, or is the formula more so just go get a quarterback every 3 years, but keep the foundation of your team, veteran, strong, and overpaid? Overpaid being a very selective term, but I'm interested to see how that goes. Like, for example, the Eagles, even though they lost the Super Bowl, they were the first Super Bowl team to lose both defensive and offensive coordinators since the Falcons back from the 2016 season. And we've seen what's happened to the Falcons since their Super Bowl appearance. So I'm not saying that the same thing will happen, because I think the Eagles have actually drafted well and they just have a better roster. They shouldn't fall off the face of the planet in the next 2 years. But if they do, I think it could be another piece of evidence into, what's the right move after you get that far. Like, are you willing to sacrifice potential future Super Bowl runs to hold on to Jalen Hurts? Or do you just go ahead and start look for drafting a quarterback next year and just keep that thing rolling that way? Because, they were just in the Super Bowl with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz. So I'm more interested to see if the quarterback position is as important as we have always grown up thinking it is. And I'm starting to have doubts.
I think Trent Dilfer proved that it wasn't that important.
Rex Grossman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rex Grossman.
Speaking of the Colts, as a callback there, Jim Irsay, I don't know if he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, or if he's playing checkers while everyone else is playing chess.
He's smoking crack while everybody else is just doing lines.
I'm kind of inclined to say the latter, but he said the reason why they hired Shane Steichen, and he said the reason why they hired him was because, quote, he says they favored an offensive coach, quote, knowing we're going to have to find a young quarterback to develop. And he said that, and Chris Ballard was like, hey man, like, why don't you just tell the whole world what our plan is?
We're going after Bryce.
And then later he said the Alabama guy doesn't look bad, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So they're picking 4th overall, and it sounds like they're going to be drafting a quarterback. Although,
The only thing that could have made that statement worse if he said that Alabama boy don't look that bad. Then it'd be like, oh, Jesus Christ. Somebody get Jim back into the closet.
Oh, God. You can always depend on Jim Irsay to be entertaining, if nothing else.
Oh, yeah.
Like just go put him in the limo with a stripper and give him a bottle of Jack and just let him do his thing. Let us.
That's right. You still own this team. Yet you are the owner, sir. Yep, right this way.
Just like Mark Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
You're
God.
the owner. That's right. You are.
Mm-hmm. Look, we got you this hat that says owner. Please wear it.
It's like, come on, Jim. We got you some strippers. Come sit over here and shut your mouth.
Or keep it open, but just keep the stripper in it. Just don't let any words out.
You would think somebody in the front office would like figure out that at least 50% of your job is going to be damage control on keeping the owner from running his mouth and revealing all of your plans as an organization.
Yeah.
Or like tell him things that you don't care if they get out. Like just don't tell him everything. Like, I know he's got his ideas of what's going on, and you can make other plans away from that. Like, I don't know.
So we're
Maybe
starting to see little
out.
rumors that Will Levis is climbing the draft boards, which
Mm-hmm.
I've learned from my past work with NFL draft stuff that there's no such thing. Essentially, there's almost never any case where a player is, quote, climbing the draft boards after the season. It's always a function of NFL media coming into alignment with NFL front offices in terms of how they evaluate players. Because the front offices have been evaluating the players all season. They've had their scouting teams. They've had people that are dedicated to this all along. So they've been establishing how they evaluate these players and stuff. So it's not like they end the season and then they're like, oh, quick, gotta go study, gotta go figure out these players. Oh, this guy, we didn't think he was much before, but now this guy really seems like something.
Did you see him in the Senior Bowl? Wow.
Right.
Really lit it up around all those other players that he's never played with. Woo.
Those are just data points that confirm their positions that they already have on the player. So if you're hearing Will Levis is really climbing up the draft boards, then that means that the teams were really high on Will Levis all along, and NFL media just wasn't high enough on them. Because there's two parts of draft evaluation. There's what do I think of this player and how do I evaluate them? What do I think of their potential? And what do I think the NFL thinks of the player? And how is the NFL going to value him? So like the clearest example of this to me, when I was, this will kind of show you when I was actually involved in doing this stuff. I think it was a 2013 draft, up until like the week of the draft, Aaron Donald was a consensus late third type pick. Most people had him in their top 100, but the criticisms of him was that he was undersized, that he wasn't strong enough, he didn't have enough anchor, and he was too short, and he was going to get pushed around, so he wasn't going to be that great of a run defender. And so he was going to be like a situational pass rusher. That was kind of the general analysis of him. And a buddy of mine and I, who were both big into the draft at the time, we were like, this is the best defensive line prospect in the draft. This guy is a absolute freak of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so the struggle that we had was, we think that this guy is a top 10 pick in terms of talent. Like, that's where we would take him if we were running an NFL team. But there is not a single person on the planet that's talking about him that way. So where do you rank him? Where do you put his actual ranking? Are you ranking him as, this is where we think the player should be, or this is where we think the player will be? And so for a long time, we just said he's a first round prospect. We said we think he's going to be in the first round, but given the sound of things, yeah, maybe he's going to be like somewhere between 23 and 37, somewhere in that range. And then the month of the draft rolled around, and all of a sudden people started talking about Aaron Donald. Hey, this guy from Pitt, he's pretty good. You know, he's actually he's climbing up the draft boards. And then I remember this report, the week of the draft, it was reported that someone, I want to say maybe it was the Giants, or there was someone who came out and said, oh, they're thinking about taking him with their first pick. And there was someone who was in the top 15. And that was when my buddy and I, we were like, okay, this is very affirming that we were on an island for several months talking about this guy as being a top 10 pick. And now people are actually starting to get there with him. And then that's where he wound up. I think he was, I want to say he's 13th overall or 12th or somewhere in that range is where he was ultimately drafted. But this year I have another guy that I think is going to be like that, just as an aside. His name is Keon White. And I didn't even remember what team he plays for, but I know that I started watching him and I was like, he's being talked about in the second. You know, he's like a top 75 kind of a player. And if I had money to put down on something and there was odds on it, I would put money on him going in the first round. So I just want to get that on the record right now here, so that so later I told you so.
Georgia Tech.
Yes, yeah, Georgia Tech. His only knock that I see on him is just that he's old for a prospect. I think he's 24 now.
Yeah, he's a redshirt senior, but with the COVID year, yeah, he could be
That's what it was.
mid-20s.
Right.
There's one guy. What school is it? I'm going to get it wrong. Yeah, it doesn't matter what school. He's going into his 9th year, like 8th or 9th year, something like that, because of I think a medical redshirt year, the COVID year, which was actually 2 years of extra eligibility. And then I think he also transferred. Like, he did everything possible to get the fullest extent of the possible eligibility window, that he's either going into his 8th or 9th year. But it's
I saw that he's already finished one degree and he's like working on a second one because he's still there and he's still playing. Like,
I'm pretty sure Keon White was a transfer too. I think he transferred from like Bowling Green or something.
Old Dominion.
Old Dominion, yeah.
Yeah, he went from Old Dominion to Georgia Tech. He's out of North Carolina. He's a 6'5", 286. It says DL, but I think he's an edge rusher.
He can. That's his. He can do both.
Yeah.
He's a. You got him. He can play on the edge. He can play in the middle.
And so yeah, 285. And 6'5". That just kind of depends on the system. Like, you can be that 4-3 defensive tackle, or you can be that 3-4 edge rusher, or you could even be on the edge on a 4-3 if they're flexing a big line. There's a lot of flexibility with that size.
He has tape of him tracking a running back coming out of the backfield in coverage and following him and defending him on a wheel route in the red zone at 6'5", 285. I saw that clip and I was like, oh, gimme. I want to see what this guy turns into. And being his age and being like a rookie, being a 24-year-old rookie as a defensive lineman isn't really that big of a deal. It's not. That's a position where it's fine. You can't project them quite as much as you can project a younger guy, because he's already reaching his physical prime.
Yeah.
So if you draft a guy who has all the exact same traits and he's 20 or 21, then he's a lot more projectable. He has even a higher ceiling. Whereas you're drafting a guy like this as someone who's going to be basically already at his physical prime, and so then it's just a matter of developing technique and that sort of thing.
I haven't paid too close attention to the the brain trust over, just down the road from Georgia Tech, that being the Atlanta Falcons, as far as their plan. So I don't know if a guy like Keon fits their 3-year plan, but I could see him easily ended up being a Falcon. Like they don't like to draft, nor have, they don't draft UGA players. They have always prided themselves, regardless who the GM is, on finding the diamond in the rough. And this is the perfect diamond in the rough candidate. Played on a shitty team, didn't get a lot of coverage. He plays in an area of need. But I did hear an interview with Arthur Blank, I think it was this past week, where they were asking him about the Lamar Jackson situation and if he was going to get involved, and how much meddling does he how much tampering does he actually do in the day-to-day player personnel selection and all this other stuff. And he's like, I don't do any of that. All I ask is that, the coaches, the GMs, and the president competently explains to me their vision, their plan, and just let me know the players that they are going after to fulfill that plan. And he said that going into year 3 of the current regime for the Falcons, that they've done exactly what they spelled out to him from day one as far as whatever their plan is, which I would love to know what the plan is. It'd be cool if they let the fan base in on like, hey guys, don't worry about all, mix in a little Jim Irsay and just kind of like let some shit slip and be like, we're going D this year. We see a lot of, we're going heavy D, a lot of good defensive prospects. This, just something. Give us no one knows what they're doing, but apparently there's a plan and nobody can decipher it. Hopefully Keon's a part of that plan now. As a Georgia fan, I hate Georgia Tech, but I got no problem once you go to the NFL. Just help my team there.
It's funny. I'm going and looking at some of the news and stuff about him, and I haven't really paid attention to any of this stuff in probably a month. And I'm looking at it now, and so Tankathon, they have a mock draft that has him going 35th or 36th, and then another site described him as a projected first round pick. So I guess the hype is already building.
Oh yeah,
it sounds like he did pretty well at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, no, I heard good things. There's a little bit more buzz for him here, in sports talk because of the location. So I was aware of him. Forgot his name. I'm not a fan of his, but when you said it, I was like, wait, I know that fucking name. I was just as shocked of, oh, he's the Georgia Tech guy. He's the one guy that's been getting all the buzz. But as far going back to, players moving up the draft board or whatever, to me, all of that is just the closest thing that the NFL has to market manipulation. They already know full and well, each team, I think, has their whiteboard pretty well filled out before the playoffs even start. Like, they are fully aware of who they want and what direction they would like to go. And you have the bucket of players going, if we can get them, sure, but let's actually look at this, and that's why
I'm sure there's, to some extent, the way we do our fantasy drafts. It's like you got the 3 players that there's the one that you really want, the one you'd be okay with, and the one you'll settle for. And then and then if it ends up that there's another one that you didn't even expect that's better than all of those there, then you're like, okay, well, I guess I got to go do that then. And that's the only time that it really you really see something that.
But you could also see that maybe the Broncos and the Chiefs and maybe the Chargers are slipping stuff out. Like, Will Levis is really good. Will Levis is really good. While they all know something like he cannot scramble left and throw a pass more than 15 yards or whatever, trying to get the Raiders to bite on it so that they go, hey, Raider, let's build up the buzz on this guy so that our opponent gets him, so that the guy that we really want's there and our opponents know better for it.
Who drafts third?
That shit happens all the fucking time. It's I I'm pretty sure it's because of a trade to a trade to a trade or something, but I could be mistaken.
It's the Cardinals. So it goes Bears, Texans, Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks.
And I think one of those teams is going to trade out. I could see the Bears trading out.
I think the Bears are almost like they're doing all they can to not
Jim Irsay it.
broadcast that they're Jim Irsay.
Man, we're gonna have so many draft picks this year.
Right. I mean, it seems like a match made in heaven. The Colts and the Bears, because the Bears can trade out. They can command a king's ransom for the pick.
You think that deal is pretty much already done? You think that's why Jim Irsay's out there like, rootin' tootin', we got our guy?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Because then the Bears are still in the top 5. Like they could still get, they almost definitely could trade out of the number 1 spot and still get one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. Because you got to assume that the Texans are probably going to take a quarterback, unless the only quarterback they rate in this draft is whomever goes number 1, and then they may say, whoever the next best quarterback isn't worth the number 2 pick, which is a pretty ballsy move.
Yeah.
But if you got a new head coach coming in there and he's going to put his stamp and he's not just going to just jump at the first guy that presents himself, and that would I'm sure have been something that they discussed in an interview. So, I mean, hey, maybe the Texans is where Lamar winds up, or Derek Carr. That would be kind of a funny little synchronicity.
So one thing that you could see is
then Houston can ruin 2 car careers.
Call it a car crash.
I got some racist jokes in my mind, but I won't say them.
Wrong show, Jim. Wrong show.
I know, and it's at nighttime too. You think this shit could fly, but it would be funny if the Colts are sitting there in whatever draft pick they have, and both C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young are there, and they go C.J. Stroud, and then it will just further prove that Irsay is just out there, misdirecting and is like, I'm slick. But I look at things more of like, that they're just throwing they're just trying to throw a fake. They're trying to say that they're going to go one direction to get the market to respond, so that whatever guy they actually wanted is still available there and kind of getting glossed over a little bit. In short, I think whichever team ends up with CJ Stroud will have won this year's quarterback class, because to me, I think he's the best talent available in this year's draft. And I don't know if fuck it, I'll say it. And I don't think it's even that close. I'm not a believer in Bryce Young at the next level. I don't think Anthony Richardson is going to be worth a shit for at least the next 3 years. I think he is a player that will need 3 years to be able to fully show what he can develop into. Will Levis.
If Will Levis goes to a team that has a decent run game, he will be very good. The games that they were able to run the ball, he was phenomenal. The games that they didn't, he was average at best.
To me, he's a perfect Tannehill replacement. But I don't know if he's going to be available.
Hey, Titans.
I mean, I as far as like ideal landing spots, I would put the Titans as top 3 for Will Levis. But I don't think he's going to be available.
You've got with the Colts, you've got
No, you can't say Jonathan Taylor because Jim's sour on Jonathan Taylor. He had a bad experience in his fantasy year. He drafted Jonathan Taylor in too many leagues, and it completely fucked him over. So you can't say Jonathan Taylor and Jim is never going to buy that. That ship sailed for him. That ship sailed for him in like week 3.
Well, Jim, take your earbuds out for just a second, because I'm going to say Jonathan Taylor. So the Colts have a good offensive line, and they've got Jonathan Taylor, and they've got a good set of wide receivers already as well. So, I mean, I think, again, if I had money to bet on this, I think I would probably be betting a healthy chunk on Will Levis, number 1 overall to the Colts. I think that seems where things are are headed right now. And then the question to me then would be, who's the number 2 pick? Do the Texans go quarterback? Do they take the number 2 quarterback? Or do the Texans do something like sign Jimmy G and leave quarterback for another day? I guess
it depends on the direction that the
that
Texans are planning on going in. Like if they're in a legitimate rebuild and they're expecting it to take 3 or 4 years, that's not going to be something that they turn around in 2. Then you go with somebody other than a quarterback. You look at your quarterback next year. But if they're trying to turn this thing around in 2 years, then they have to take a quarterback. So like I guess it depends on like what's the front office plan for moving forward. Like are you looking at it in this is our 5-year plan or is this our 2-year plan?
Frankly,
if I were the Texans,
if I was them, frankly, I would sign a quarterback like Jimmy G, and you got the 49ers connection there, and then I would draft whichever quarterback is available there, whichever one I rate highest there, because I think drafting number 2 overall is just such a significant opportunity that the way draft picks are, like the number 1 pick is just like lightning in a bottle. Number 2 is very similar. Number 3 is pretty nice. 4, 5, 6, 7. As you start getting down through those, then it becomes, to me, it changes the decision-making process. Because if you've got basically a top 3 pick, then I think you have to, if you don't have a settled quarterback situation and you have a top 3 pick, I think you have to take a quarterback. And even if the quarterback isn't necessarily, Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence, or, he's not a generational prospect, if he's a quarterback worth taking there, then you have to take him at that spot. And if he doesn't work out, then oh well. And then every year you should be drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, because not every number 1 overall pick lands. I mean, the most obvious example is Jamarcus Russell. But if you look at the list, there's a few that, like, obviously going back to what I know best, and that's the Falcons. When they drafted Michael Vick, that changed the trajectory of the entire franchise overnight for the next decade. Would have been longer if, he didn't do that thing with dogs. But at least it wasn't like never mind. But you look at like Eli Manning, 2 Super Bowl wins. You don't get that without him for the Giants. Now how much did Jadeveon Clowney matter? None at all. Baker Mayfield, none really. Kyler, none. Jameis Winston, none. I mean, there's Eric Fisher. There's a lot of first, number 1 picks that aren't the guy. I'm wondering.
Here's a list of every number 1, all 25 quarterbacks selected with a top 5 pick since 2001. This was made in June of 2020, so
okay,
it doesn't include the last 2 seasons. Starting from the worst: Jamarcus Russell, number 1 overall; Joey Harrington, number 3 overall; David Carr, number 1 overall; Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 overall; Blake Bortles, number 3 overall; Marcus Mariota, number 2 overall; Mark Sanchez, number 3 overall; Baker Mayfield, number 1 overall; Sam Darnold, number 3 overall; Robert Griffin III, number 2 overall; Sam Bradford, number 1; Kyler Murray, number 1; Vince Young, number 3; Jameis Winston, number 1; Jared Goff, number 1; Carson Wentz, number 2; Alex Smith, number 1; Carson Palmer, number 1; Eli Manning, number 1; Matthew Stafford, number 1; Michael Vick, number 1; Cam Newton, number 1; Phillip Rivers, number 4; Matt Ryan, number 3; and Andrew Luck, number 1. That's a lot bigger miss rate than hit rate.
Yeah.
To be fair, at least a couple of those, if they had stayed healthy, they had a good career trajectory going. And then, like Robert Griffin III and like Carson Wentz, before he started
spraining both ankles at the same time.
Like before his body just completely failed him. He was looking pretty good. Like Robert Griffin III looked pretty good before he started getting hurt. Mariota even had some streaks of not being bad before, but he couldn't ever stay healthy long term. Like some of those were some of those were health issues, but yeah, there were a lot of those that were just straight up whiffs.
And to me, this year is ripe with that. Like I said, out of the top 4 quarterbacks, the unanimous top 4 right now who we've talked about, I don't feel good about any of them really. CJ Stroud has shown me one good game, and it was his last game, which helps him. Obviously, it's a recency bias. Don't look at the game right before that when he was getting smoked at home by Michigan. But I just don't.
You said that about Irsay talking about, or maybe lightly hinting at Bryce Young. Like, I feel like I think that's definitely a play. Like, there's no way they want him. I don't think he's that good, at least on the NFL level.
No.
Honestly, the two quarterbacks who are probably the most interesting to me in this draft because they're kind of unknown quantities, but they kind of intrigue me are Anthony Richardson and Hendon Hooker. Those are the two that are most.
If Hooker had stayed healthy for the entirety of the season, we talked about it in our college preview at the beginning of the season. Like, I called him my Heisman pick, and like if he had stayed healthy for the entirety of the year, I think he would be much more highly rated right now than what he is. I think he's going to be one of those guys that like ends up probably falling to like early second round or something, and in a few years he's going to like surprise everybody because he is really, really, really good.
Literally the biggest downside with him is his age. He's 25 now, so he's not quite Brandon Weeden, but he's starting to get up there. So, but I mean, quarterback is another one of these positions where all they
don't expire at 31.
Right? Yeah. No. All you're really looking at is just okay. So if he hits, then you're going to get him for like 12 seasons instead of 16 seasons. Like whoop-de-doo.
Right. Yeah, it's not like the running backs where like they hit 30 and then it's just
they just turn to dust.
Yeah, they fall off the cliff.
Frank Gore. Yeah. Frank Gore is the Ric Flair of running backs. That dude just keeps coming back for his final match, and it's like, good Lord.
I feel like the only reason he retired is because he got bored with playing football. Like, he could be 45 and just still plugging away 3.2 yards per carry every single day.
He's like, I don't want the Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. thing. I don't want to be playing on the same field with my son, so I should probably step away. But shit, what was I going to say? Oh, the Hendon Hooker thing. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that's going to hurt him, which I completely believe he'll settle into the second or third round, is because of how late he got injured. And he was playing on the shittiest field in all of SEC, and that is in South Carolina, where everybody's knees go to die. And I watched a lot of Hendon Hooker. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's got very good accuracy. He should be a pocket passer, not a scrambler. Every time that kid ran, and I say kid, even though he's in his mid-20s, his mechanics are so bad running that I think that had a lot to do with why he blew his knees out. If you just watch the game Tennessee versus South Carolina and watch every scrambling play he has, it looks like a baby horse, like a newborn horse, like knees pointed in different directions. Just everything looked like it was like laborious.
What's up with Tennessee and the quarterbacks who can't run to save their life? Remember, it was the older Clausen, I think it was
Casey?
Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy, yeah.
Jimmy, the older Clausen back
Jimmy
in the
Notre Dame.
Yeah. Oh, was it? So it might have been Casey. He played for the one that played for Tennessee. There was one game where he like had to scramble and he was running for the goal line and like jumped through the air, and it was the least graceful. It looked like somebody threw an octopus on the field. Like just the way he flailed through the air going into the end zone. Like
Sage Rosenfels-esque.
It was a wonder he got up from it. Like nobody even hit him either. He just like dove for the end zone, and it was the most horrifying looking dive you've ever seen in your life. Like the announcers were making fun of it.
So like conversely, I'd say Anthony Richardson has much higher pure athletic ability, and you can see that when he scrambles. You can see same thing with Cam Newton. And players like that, when they run, you just see fluidity. Like, oh, this comes very naturally to them. That they aren't freaking out. Like they're not in hyper focused drive or whatever. Like they're just smoothly running around. But with Hendon Hooker, every time he had to leave the pocket, it's like his legs just freaked out, wanted to go different directions. Like it was bizarre. And it was one thing I noticed. Yeah, exactly. Just with bigger brains, which isn't saying a lot. But Hendon, I do like Hendon Hooker. I got nothing bad to say about him. But yeah, I'm gonna eat this W. But yeah, that Jameis Winston, man. I wonder if he has a customized short bus that gets him to the stadium. It's probably pretty slick in there. Probably has crab legs. I guarantee it's got crab legs in there. But I don't know. I see things that other people don't see, and then when I bring it up, especially like if I'm watching it here watching a game here at the house, I'm like, did you see how his ankles just said "fuck this" and went in different directions, but somehow he got 5 yards? And then they look and they go, now I can't unsee it. Like it's just this herky jerky, and it's like, okay, hell of a passer though. Got nothing wrong with that. Yeah. A pest missile, I think, is what they call it. So the draft probably isn't until April or sometime way too late in the season. That shit should be in March. It should be 2 weeks after the combine, in my opinion. That way they can get all of that over with and then just immediately start on training camp like in April and have 4 months of training camp so that we don't have to have preseason games and all this other dumb. Anyway. Totally different episode. We got plenty of time to talk about all of those nuanced things that bother me. But when is the combine? Normally it's in late February. Is anybody even know?
It is 2023 combine. Why is this not just popping up? When is the NFL combine? February 27 to March 6.
All right. So a couple weeks away. I don't know about y'all, but I watch that shit. If I'm home and it's on, I will. I remember I brought that up like in a work meeting because they were talking about some like training guys or hiring guys and like how do we find the right prospects. I remember I shot out some bullshit cliche that I heard on the combine. They're like, you watch a bunch of grown adult men in their underwear running around trying to impress other dudes, man, that's gay.
Damn right I do.
And I was like, I mean, yeah, I guess it is pretty gay, but I know more about the sport you also claim to love. You
Jim's like, you goddamn right I do. I love it every second.
You're goddamn right I do. What are you talking about?
So y'all want to come over to the house and watch with me? Bring your spandex.
Bring your underwear. Let's bench press each other. No, I watch it because I find it. I want the players from my college team to go represent themselves well and destroy and improve their draft stock so they can get paid. Because that in turn it comes back to Georgia and says, look, this is what you can also earn. And also I want to see when the Falcons inevitably draft the inside tackle from University of Minnesota. It's like, well, I guess I better know who the fuck this guy is. So I watched the combine, and then it's 2 months because the draft isn't until April 27th, exactly 2 months after the combine starts. Way too much time. Way too much.
Then they've got to go have pro days because there's guys who don't make it to the combine, and
then it's just like, mock draft after mock draft. Oh, I fucking hate mock drafts. Or I hate people that discuss mock drafts and like, oh, well, this guy has this guy going 10th, but he's not going until the 3rd round. And let's have a discussion. And I'm like, that's sports talk radio, just abyss. And I fucking hate mock draft season. I fucking hate it.
I'm going to make another call. I'm going to make a call that Bryce Young is going to do all of his weighing and measurements and everything at the combine. He's going to
Oh.
weigh in at 202. And then he's not going to participate at his pro day.
See, I would have taken it the other way, that he wouldn't go to the combine. He's going to get weighed on Alabama scales. And
I think he's gonna have to go to the combine because he isn't the consensus number one pick. He hasn't blown everyone away. They're still talking about Levis. They're still talking about C.J. Stroud. There's still conversation there. I think he's going to have to go to the combine, and I think he's probably going to throw at the combine. And so I think him being there, I think he's gonna do all of his weigh-ins and everything, and he's going to throw, and he's probably going to run. Or no, he's not going to run, but he's going to run at his pro day. So he's going to drink like 10 gallons of water, weigh in at 202, and then be able to piss it all out, and then do everything else at his pro day. But I think he's going to measure in at 202. I think that's the mark, 202 or 203.
There you go.
I mean, it's not like it makes a difference whether he's 199 or 203, but like psychologically, oh well, he's 200 pounds, so he's not too small.
He's gonna wear his platforms, be like, "Get me up to 5'11", please." He's a little guy, and that's why I would think he would not go to the combine, because him standing in a group next to all the other quarterbacks that are 6 to 8 inches taller than him is going to hurt him. And if he goes to the combine, he's going to have to throw, because he's going to have to show what separates him from the pack. And throwing is his strong suit. It's the thing that he's probably better than anybody else in this draft class at. He's probably the best passer, which is great when you're not getting hit. But when you're that little, and you play at Alabama where you're not used to feeling pressure that often, then what? And I'll never say he's not talented. He's probably the most talented quarterback. I just think that he has all the other intangibles going against him that's going to make him a very, very, very short, potentially bright, shining star in the NFL, if he even gets the opportunity. I think he's out of the NFL within like a year and a half, 2 years. I think he gets clobbered by an Aaron Donald type, and he gets Tua'd.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot to add to that. I was going to say my favorite part of the combine is watching the guys that show up that are like just the combine freaks, like the dudes that have specifically trained to show out and to make a big showing at the combine, because like those are fun. Like at that point, it's like an Olympic event. It's like these guys are just here to put on a freak show. Like this is what I can do. And those guys, like they're usually no-name guys or they played at like a decent sized school, but they didn't do anything really for their 4 years, and then they come to the combine and it's just like, holy fuck, why have we never heard of this guy before? It's like because he specifically has been training just for and I think the league has caught on to that over the last several years too. But
yeah, I'm an outside linebacker at Purdue, the school that's known for its linebackers. It's like, what? No. And then it's like this guy just goes and crush it, and it's like, well, I guess somebody's got to take a flyer on him and draft him in the top 15, and then he becomes obscure. Who the fuck was that? 3 years later.
Like the difference between a 4.3 and a 4.5 40 is just technique.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a guy who runs a 4.5 40, then chances are you can probably run a 4.3 if you train for it. If you specifically train on the technique, like the biggest thing is getting out of the blocks.
I ran a 4.56. And I could catch dudes who ran 4.2, 4.3 if I like in game situation if I needed to. But like if I'm being timed on it, I never could get under a 4.56. Like I was average 4.58 typically. But like they'd be like, oh yeah, that running back for Fort Campbell runs a 4.2. I catch him every time. Like there's no problem. Like
it's kind of like when I would play basketball when I was a kid. I would be like I'm a white guy. I couldn't jump worth shit. But if I was chasing somebody down and like going up for a block, then I could touch the rim. I couldn't stand there and jump and touch the rim, but if I was chasing somebody and I was trying to block a shot, then I could touch the rim. There's like this psychological thing where if you have something that distracts you, something else that you're focused on, then it unlocks a different like physical capacity you didn't otherwise know you have.
Incentivized athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legit thing.
Give me something to, give you something to chase for, and you'll get wildly different results than just run. There's a difference between chasing and running.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of the guys that are really good at running aren't that great at chasing, or they don't have some other traits. So you get a guy like John Ross, who set the combine record for 40, was drafted in the top 10 and played 5 games ever, and then just flamed out of the league. He came from UW too. He's a fantastic college player.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fantastic punt returner and just a brilliant offensive weapon.
Well, that's like they do like change of direction drills with the DBs, and you watch their hips and stuff. It's like that stuff doesn't have anything to do with how well you're going to cover a guy running a fly route versus a guy running a skinny post versus a guy that's running a hook and go. Like, that stuff, it's all well and good for the combine, but it really doesn't translate to how well you can actually cover a real human being on a football field.
Well, it's also why I've been saying the entire time, and I'm going to shit on one of my own, players, Keely Ringo, the guy who was the savior of the 2022 national championship, making that final interception against Bryce Young and returning it for a touchdown. It was like, oh my God, he's going to go down in UGA lore as like Lindsey Scott or any like the biggest plays in Georgia football history. But his technique sucks. The reason why he intercepted it is he was 5 yards short of the receiver, and it was an underthrown pass. So it just turned out to be the greatest play of all time because he was right place, right time. But he was not in position. He's got hips made of concrete. His technique is, I will pass interference. I would rather get a pass interference call than give up a catch or a touchdown, which there are times when that's beneficial and there are times when it's not. Like when it's 3rd and 13 and a guy's throwing into the end zone and you just don't ever turn your head around or your hips and you just run into the guy and it's like, stop the touchdown. It's like, yeah, but now they have first down. Like if you just turn your head, if you just turn your head and just swatted it down, then you would be a good player. But just running into the guy and be like, didn't catch it, did he? It molests the stats because then people start looking at stats going, he's only given up 3 touchdowns in his career. It's like, yeah, but he also gave up like 12 PIs in the end zone. So I don't really know if that's super cool. That's really going to suck in the NFL. But he's one of the highest regarded DBs coming in pre-combine into, all these mock drafts or whatever. He's like a top 5 cornerback. And I'm like, I hope we don't draft him. And he's on the Dogs, a fucking hero. But just like you were saying, Justin, if you look at technique and where you can spot a true athlete, he's going to need a lot of coaching. I think he's immediately got to get moved out of a cornerback into a safety position. I think he could be a remarkable safety. Just go out there and hit the fuck out of people. But to stay with somebody, track them, and transition with them, no.
You're talking about DBs and not finding the ball. It's been my bitch all year.
Yeah, that bounce passes, or bouncing swing passes.
Bouncing swing passes and DBs who can't cover.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, we've barely even mentioned it.
There was the game played.
Yeah, and a DB ended up kind of really changing the course of at least how that game ended. I don't even know if there's really much to say on the first 3.5 quarters of that game. It was just, it was a game. It was a bit of a shootout. Like Jalen Hurts fumbling and the Chiefs returning it for a touchdown to tie it up. I think if that doesn't happen, the Eagles really have a good chance of running away with it. But because they didn't.
I haven't even watched a highlight of the game. I didn't watch the game. I was busy that day, and I haven't even watched the highlights.
It's not even it. As far as all-time Super Bowls, it will be forgotten. It wasn't good. Like it to me anyway. I'm going to speak out of turn and just go ahead and give my final full-blown whatever. I was bored. As a person that's not a fan of either team, and I watched the whole game. It was one of those I was watching the game like this, like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to save that meme. Oh, cool, they converted. All right. And then it was like, oh, Rihanna's coming out. Let me see what this is. And then I was like, I forgot. I hate Super Bowl halftime shows since 2008. I don't know. Just it was a Super Bowl, I guess, but it didn't have any of the feel to it. Like it, I don't know what it. And I said this on last week's episode. I just don't have. Even watching the game, it didn't feel like a Super Bowl to me, like the way that they used to. Maybe they're. I don't know. It just felt like another TV broadcast of a football game.
I enjoyed it, but it might have been more because of the way I was watching it. Like I was watching it on my phone while other people were watching it on their phones at work, and like we're all kind of chattering back and forth and passing at each other about different things that are happening in the game, or like some of the guys ordered pizza, and so we were like standing in the office while people were eating, and we all were watching and talking about the game all at the same time. And then my fucking phone cut out. Like my signal cut out with like 4 minutes to go in the game. And so I'm like trying to get it to pull back up. And then I just take off sprinting out of the building, run across to the other building where I knew one of the guys had it on. And one of the guys at work, he was like, "Is everything all right? What's going on?" I was like, "My phone won't pull the game up, and I know Jeff's got it on, so I'm running over there to watch it on his fork truck." He's like, "Oh, okay." Like, I think just like the environment of watching the game was the more entertaining part for me. Like I didn't have any rooting interest for either team. It was an entertaining enough game. There was some question about the pass interference call. The DB, I can't remember his name. He admitted to it after the game that he grabbed him. Like even as a DB, I watched that and I'm like that could be let go, but they're technically right to call it. Like they
weren't calling anything the whole game, which was perfect. It was exactly what you want in a Super Bowl championship, any kind of game like that. It's like just let them play. And then they were like,
I don't like the call, but it's technically the right call. So what do you do in that situation? But yeah, I mean, it was.
You're pissed if you're a Phillies fan or an Eagles fan, and you go, what are you gonna do if you're a Chiefs fan? And if you're somebody like me, it's like it was technically the right call, but
well, and we had the same. There was the same controversy in last year's the Rams Bengals. There was a pass interference call that was as having played both receiver and DB, like by the letter of the rule book, it was technically the right call. I don't give a shit what had happened at any point prior to that in the game. It was the right call, whether you like it or not. Like it was the same thing for that. I don't care how they were calling it the entire rest of the game. In that one situation, like it was technically the right call.
What I hate is that like everybody's immediately bitching about, oh, it's the refs, the fucking refs, and the memes of the refs wearing a Chiefs jersey or whatever. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like if you're an Eagles fan, I get it. Be salty, be bitter. Trust me, that's where I live.
Burn Philadelphia down. Just burn it down.
Yeah, just burn it down. Like burn it down tomorrow and don't even use this. Like just burn it. But to sit there as like football casuals to come in and be like, the fucking refs. Oh. Were the refs weren't it also the refs that said Dallas Goedert got that catch on the sideline where it could have easily been called no catch? Did the refs have anything to do with Jalen Hurts just inexplicably going, don't want this? Here, Chiefs, you take it and you score a touchdown. Instead of us going up by 2, I want them to tie it up. Like the refs had nothing to do with that. And the refs were letting everything go except for that one thing that the player that was called said they got it right. So I'm all about argument. I'm all about being petty, salty.
We know.
Bickering, all that. I'm about all that. But not on this. This game was not decided by the refs at all. Because even if, let's say that there was no holding, that catch, that ball was not catchable. I do agree. If they're going to bitch about anything, be like, they called holding on a non-catchable ball. Not on the fact that it was ticky-tacky holding. But let's say that play just doesn't happen. The Chiefs are forced to kick a field goal, which is what they did anyway. But now there's like 1:53 left, giving the Eagles enough time to potentially go down for a game tying or a game winning touchdown. Game tying field goal or a game winning touchdown. The way that the Chiefs were playing, in the fourth quarter, there was no guarantee that was going to happen. That game was fucking over when the Chiefs were just running it up and down the field all fourth quarter. That game was a wrap. I didn't see any miracles coming out of it. The second half Eagles just came out flat, and I think it's because lack of experience in those type of games. The majority of the players they have from their last Super Bowl win 4 or 5 years ago aren't on that team anymore. The Chiefs, however, have been to 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, so they knew how to handle that halftime. Because you hear a lot of times teams that are in the Super Bowl for the first time with that staff don't know how to manage that long layover, that long time off of the halftime. And typically they come out full of piss and vinegar and blow up the first half and just can't get it back to that level again in the second half. And that's exactly what happened to Philly. You got
they were talking about that because of Mahomes re-aggravating his ankle injury. They were talking about how like a typical halftime is like 15 minutes or something, and the Super Bowl halftime is 29 minutes, and how that's a long time for Patrick Mahomes to be off of his feet and have that ankle have a chance to sit and get tight. It's like, yeah, they're not gonna do that though. They're gonna give him a cortisone shot right as soon as they get into the locker room, and then they're gonna give him another one right before halftime ends before they come back out, and he's gonna be fine. It's the having come out hot Eagles that are going to be more affected by this, because now they've got like we talked about, like momentum is a real thing. And if you've got momentum and then you've kind of had it take a ding and then you have to go sit for twice as long as you're used to, 10, 12 minutes, you're ready to go. And then you're sitting there like 20, 25 minutes. It's like, oh fuck, do we ever get to play again?
Oh yeah, that's right. It's this. It's also the Super Bowl.
It's right out of your sail.
Yeah, and this half of the Super Bowl really fucking counts. So you got to amp yourself back up while you're hearing the halftime show going on. You're like, this isn't a game. This isn't a normal game at all. Like everything's different. So I think if the Eagles are able to go back in the next 3 to 4 years, they will probably win it because of the experience in that position, depending on obviously who they go up against. But I think that they will be better suited for an environment like that. I think that young teams going to Super Bowls, just like the Bengals the year prior, and how old Stafford is, and all that shit, and plus the Rams were just in a Super Bowl a few years earlier, losing to the Patriots. Sean McVay, there's something to that. If once you've seen it and you've experienced it, and you lose, you tend to fare much better if you can get back there within the next 3 to 4, sometimes 5 years. And I think the Eagles will be just fine if they get back. But that's why I said, like, the holding call had nothing to do with the final outcome of that game. It was going in the direction that those kind of games always go in. And I don't think there was shit that Philly was going to be able to do about it. But I'm glad that the game happened and it's over, because now we get to everybody that's not an Eagles or Chiefs fan gets to start to slowly build up hope for their team again. And that's what makes sports fun. I forgot last year already. All right, let me see what moves my team needs to make to potentially get me invested again.
Nah, fuck all that. I was thinking we should do a fantasy baseball league.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Fantasy baseball in a long time.
I don't know about that. That requires that's too many players.
Oh, come on, it's fun.
I've never done one.
Really?
I want to see fantasy soccer become a bigger thing. Like MLS has like a fantasy thing that they do, which it's fine, but there's lots of ways you could improve it. And I want to see. I've never done fantasy soccer with like the Premier League or anything like that, just because I don't follow the league closely enough to really do it. I follow MLS really closely, and I want to see a better application of fantasy soccer, because fantasy soccer is pretty fun. It's the different positions and stuff, and keeping track of their different stats and everything. So actually a surprising number of stats that go into soccer. So I would totally be down for that. I used to do fantasy baseball and fantasy basketball and fantasy football, and I would do like 20 or 30 leagues with each of them. And nope, Can't do that anymore. I can
That's
barely
me.
keep up with a couple of. I have 3 dynasty leagues in fantasy football, and I barely kept up with those. I might be able to get a redraft league maybe, but that's it.
My fraternity did a fantasy football or fantasy baseball league for 4 years, and I won all 4 years, and then they stopped wanting to do it anymore. So that was
they're still doing it. You're just not invited.
Right.
I hate to
they
bust your
just
bubble.
changed platforms and didn't invite me to play anymore.
Yeah.
They're still going strong. They're having the time of their fucking lives right now.
Well, I was checking stats and I was checking rosters and I was looking at starting lineups and stuff like every single day and changing my and like moving my lineups around, and I would just like destroy everybody all year long. Then it was fun for me, but after that folded, then I quit playing. I got in a fantasy hockey league a couple years ago. That was a miserable failure because none of us knew anything about hockey. I think
The Russian last name guy.
I think the one guy who won was the only one who like actually kept playing for the entirety of the season. Like we got about halfway through the year, and most of us all realized like we don't know anything about hockey, and there's no way that we're gonna salvage like being able to know anything. Like if we win, it's out of dumb luck because it's like something happened that we had no control over. Like it wasn't because we picked the right team for the week. So we kind of that kind of that petered out real quick. But
I had a buddy
like
in college who was so desperate for fantasy stuff that like he exhausted all the normal fantasy leagues, like fantasy sports, and started doing fantasy fishing.
Have you ever done one of the like?
He's in bad. He needs an intervention at that point.
Have you ever done one of like the full like all-encompassing football leagues where you draft like your linemen, like defensive and offensive linemen, you draft linebackers and defensive play? Like
I got a buddy that
you
I've
draft
done
the
one of those
whole
leagues.
team. It's nuts. I did one of those in 2012 or 2013. No, it might have been 2010. Anyway, I did one of those like 10, 15 years ago. Holy shit. I was looking at stats that I didn't even know existed. Like I learned a lot about football that even as a football player, I didn't previously know.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know anything about lineman stats. Like I was a receiver and a DB. Like I know
pancakes. I love them.
What's a pancake? Or like there were so many things that like linemen, offensive and defensive linemen get graded on, like per game that I was like I never would have imagined. And it's like there's a lot of analysis that goes into this kind of stuff that I was just completely out of the loop on. So that was pretty cool. Cool learning experience. I'll never do it again. Like that was too much.
The format that I've played the last several years, you guys actually might enjoy. It's a platform called Reality Sports Online, and it's a dynasty salary cap league. So you have the roster is whatever positions have been defined by. You can customize everything when you set it up, but typically what we do is usually a super flex. So you have like an open flex position that can be anybody. So it kind of is by default, it's a quarterback. So it's kind of like a 2 quarterback league, but you don't have to play 2 quarterbacks. And then we usually don't do like kickers or defenses because they're gay. But you, so when you start the league up, there's 2 different drafts that you do. The first draft is a rookie draft, rookie only. And then it's just a snake style draft, usually 3, maybe 4 rounds. And then the second draft is actually a free agency auction. So they have their own special software application within the browser that everyone goes in and you nominate a player and then everybody bids on him. And you're bidding contracts. So you each get X number of 4-year deals, X number of 3-year deals, X number of 2-year deals, and then 1-year deals. And you have to stay within the salary cap that tracks the actual NFL salary cap. So you have to decide, do you want to give your 4-year deal to a really expensive guy and, just go like stars and scrubs? Or do you want to give your 4-year deal to a really cheap under the radar guy? So you get him really cheap and then you hold on to him until, the 3rd and 4th year of the deal, he's like a fantastic bargain. All these different kinds of strategies that go into it. So you're building your team kind of like an actual NFL general manager. You just don't have non-skill position players. It's just skill positions. You can do like IDP in it as well, but I've never enjoyed IDP.
It feels like NFL Blitz back in the day when it was like, do you want like the best passing game ever, or do you want the best running game, or do you want well balanced? And it's just position players. Like
I did a league the year after COVID, I guess it was, because it was our like special COVID league. It was 4 teams, but it was 4 owners, and each owner had 3 teams. So, so the way I did my draft was like for one team, I just went with like studs. Like I tried to get the best player available, and then backfill everything else with whatever I could get later on. It was all auction draft. So I went with like studs, and then backfill everything with crap. And then the other one, I went with like just middle of the road, solid players for every position. And then with the third team, I went just flyers on all of it. Like this guy might play this year, or like I think I took Michael Thomas. Like this guy might play this year and he might be good, or he might like literally die tomorrow. We'll see how it works out. And I finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th with the 3 teams. And I can't remember what the exact order was, but it was like, so none of those strategies worked, but none of them failed either. I've finished.
So were you like not able to trade among your teams?
Right. You couldn't trade between your own teams, but you could trade with everybody else. So
that's
so
really
like you couldn't.
Was it a special platform, or did you guys just use Yahoo or whatever?
I think he did it through Yahoo. It was just like it was the COVID year. Like, we're going to try something different. Who wants to do something dumb and see how it works? It was a lot of fun. He decided it was too much work for the guy who was running it. He was like, this was a ton of fun, but it's too labor intensive as the league manager to like keep up with all this shit. Highly entertaining, but yeah, I kind of figured out that there's got to be a better draft strategy than any of those 3, because all 3 of those kind of petered out somewhere along the way.
So if we're staying in the realm of football, we got, over half a year before we got I guess maybe right at half a year.
Talk about college basketball with or without you bastards.
So that's what I was saying. Like, because football, it's about 6 months before the season starts, and we can start talking about actual games that count. I'll obviously be watching the combine because I'm a nerd, and I'll definitely be watching the draft in 12 weeks whenever it finally comes around.
You're watching the combine because you can admit it.
I remember watching the combine before it was even televised, when it was just like live streams that they would do. You could go to like a website and they'd have a live stream of the combine. I remember I'm a degenerate as well.
Because they used to just do daily highlights. Like, ESPN at 6 will take you to all the big moments from today's combine, but that was the only combine footage that you had. But because of all that, and it is February, now is the time of year where I actually start looking into college basketball. I can't give a flying fuck about NBA. Just never could, never will. Like, there's a reason why I loathe some of the NFL players, because they're divas. The NBA is nothing but that, and I just can't bring myself to watch it. Maybe I can find some way to get into it. I don't know. But anyway, normally the month of February is when I start paying attention to college basketball, trying to find out now that we're well over halfway through the season, we're closing in on the end. Let me start picking teams. Are y'all interested at all in doing a March Madness bracket just to see what the fuck happens? I mean, I'm going to do one. I got a group of buddies that I've been doing one for almost 20 years with, where it's like $10 per bracket. I'm not even saying that this is what we should do, but I usually throw in $20 to $40, depending on how much basketball I watched in the month of February. It's what I base my entire knowledge of that season on, is the month of February, the shortest month of the year. And then I'll throw $20 to $40 just to watch it go away. I've never won, never come close. But that's the only other sport that I can even halfway trick myself into being entertained by before baseball gets here. And I don't know if there's any baseball fans on clock management, but once baseball season starts, I am balls deep gone into, but I can't pay attention to the whole league like I can the NFL. Like, I am my team centric fully invested, watching all the reports coming out of spring training, pitchers and catchers.
With baseball,
all
I'll
that
usually
shit.
find a couple series that are going on during the week that I'm interested in. Like if the Cardinals are playing in a good series, or like I used to be a D-backs fan, or if there's a couple teams that are playing against each other that there's some good pitcher matchups or something going on during the week, like I'll pay attention to a couple series. I'm not real super serious about a particular team. Like I was raised a Cardinals fan, and then I've been a D-backs fan for a long time, but I'm not like just super invested in either team. Like if they're winning, cool, and if they're not, it's not like I like am getting worked up about it. But I will pay attention to baseball, and I try to pick, like I said, I try to pick a couple series during a week that look engaging, and try to keep up with them and just watch how the series goes, because that's the fun thing about baseball is it's a series type sport. Like
You can get in for a good weekend series and just be fucking enthralled, and then you can check out for the rest of
right
for the next 2 months on that team if that's not your team. I do the same thing sometimes. Like if the Rockies and Dodgers are going against each other and they have like two aces that are going to line up like on a Saturday night, I'm fucking watching that game. But I am 1,000,000% like dug in on my team the whole year. Braves baseball. I mean, I just grew up, with the Braves being on TBS where you could watch it wherever. Like I'll never forget, being like 4 years old, sitting with my granddad after dinner during the summers, just watching either the Cubs game on a Braves off night or the Braves game. And it was, those were the two teams that were just always on. And so for me, like I've got friends that aren't baseball fans at all and cannot possibly be dragged into watching a baseball game, which to me is bonkers. Like when the Braves are on, it's just on. It's on in my house, even if it's just background noise. That's how I know what season it is, based on if I hear the Braves game on in the background. So once that kicks up, if we're willing to talk about baseball at all, I'm down. But for me,
I'll be all about it.
For me, it's March Madness coming up next month. Yeah. He must be talking into his phone, and his phone's just recognizing words that he says all the time. But whatever. I wasn't ready for that joke. Yeah, so for me, it's college basketball for the next 6 or 4 weeks, whatever, math, and then baseball after that.
I'm just visualizing Mark walking around just going, gay. Gay.
I'm not gay. And his phone just, okay, well, the AI starts taking over, and it's like, well, you must have meant gay here.
I got to jump out of here, guys. But I'm definitely into the baseball thing. The March Madness, I wouldn't even be able to get myself into.
I've already been told by Alan Mosley that he and I are going to be doing a college basketball pick 'em, and we're going to go through all of the March Madness bracket and everything. So like I'm fully ready for that, and I suspect Mark and I will be talking about that at least a little bit here over the next couple weeks. But yeah, I'm definitely game for starting to move towards baseball, especially with pitchers and catchers are reporting in the next couple weeks.
It should be, yeah.
Like next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So yeah, it's about to hit a fun time of the year for some non-football sports. And of course there's always going to be the combine coming up, and it's not like shit doesn't happen in the off season. I mean, there's literally an NFL network. They clearly can talk about it year round. Sure. So surely we can talk about it once a week.
But now that Mark got here, let's end the show.
Yeah, time to end the show. Bye, Mark. Later, guys. This was fun. See y'all next week.
Asta.
See you guys.